We begin by observing a people of an ancient tribe, where the shaman, known as the Old Mother, channels the spirits to share an important prophecy with the other members of the tribe. She declares that four-legged demons, like ravenous beasts, will come to the valley on the day of the last hunt. The shaman continues with the prophecy, stating that a powerful warrior will arise from this hunt and will take the young Evelet as his wife. Together, they will lead the tribe to a new life, free from hunger and scarcity. However, the chief of the tribe, skeptical of the prophecy, does not believe the Old Mother's words. He is determined to find an alternative way to feed his people, instead of waiting for a hunt that could take years. Before departing on his quest, he hands his best friend, Tik-Tik, the sacred white spear, and asks him to protect his son, Delay. As soon as the chief leaves, Delay begins to face the scorn of the other boys, who mock him for being the son of a coward who abandoned the tribe. Tik-Tik always finds himself forced to break up fights and remind the children not to speak disrespectfully about their former chief. Feeling isolated, Delay starts spending more time alone, until Evelet, understanding the pain of loneliness, joins him. She also lost her people to the four-legged demons, and touched by the new friendship, Delay promises he will never leave her alone again. Years pass, and Delay and Evelet become inseparable, developing a deep love for each other. When the time of the last hunt arrives, the young Baku, now older, tells Delay that the Old Mother is certain the day of the prophecy has finally come, and that everyone believes Karen, a notable rival, will win Evelet's hand. The conversation is interrupted by Evelet's presence, who distracts Baku with food to get a moment alone with Delay. Worried about Karen's skill, she asks Delay to consider running away together. However, Delay refuses, determined not to repeat his father's mistake. He promises Evelet he will do his best to win the hunt. At that crucial moment, Baku announces that the mammoths have arrived. Tik-Tik reminds the hunters that whoever kills a mammoth will claim the white spear and become the new chief before leading them to the hunting field. They slowly approach the herd, and then Tik-Tik is the first to spot a lead mammoth. He begins to shout to scare it, and the other hunters immediately imitate him. When the mammoths start to flee in response, the hunters pursue them with fervor. A particularly enormous mammoth tries to pass through a narrow space, and the tribe manages to trap it in a net. But Karen, in a critical moment, throws his spear and misses the target. The mammoth, now free, begins to thrash and breaks free of its bonds, starting an uncontrolled escape with the net still tangled around its feet. Tik-Tik tells the hunters to release the net, as the creature is too strong. However, Delay's hand gets caught, and he can't free it, being dragged by the mammoth. After a while, the net finally gets snagged between some rocks, allowing the mammoth to finish freeing itself. However, it now begins to attack Delay. The young man dodges the attacks, freeing his hand to be able to throw his own spear, but his strike only enrages the mammoth even more. In search of a new weapon, Delay finds another spear, which, however, is stuck in the rocks. As he tries to go back to free it, the mammoth furiously chases him, but ends up accidentally colliding with the spear, which pierces its heart, causing it to fall dead on top of Delay. The tribe, which quickly mobilizes, comes to Delay's aid and congratulates him for having killed a mammoth alone, a feat no one had accomplished before. The Old Mother gives him the white spear, along with Evelet's hand, symbolizing his new position of honor. The mammoth is taken back, ready to be consumed, while the tribe begins a celebration. However, Delay feels overwhelmed by guilt, as the mammoth's death was an accident, and he seeks counsel with Tik-Tik. Delay struggles with the idea that lying is wrong, but he does not want to lose Evelet, and thus Tik-Tik reminds him that the Yagal would never claim the white spear with a lie. Later that night, Delay approaches Evelet and says he returned the spear to Tik-Tik, but adds that he still loves her and wants to be with her. Unfortunately, Evelet interprets his giving up the spear as giving up on her and pulls away. The next morning, the tribe is unexpectedly attacked by the four-legged demons, who reveal themselves to be horsemen. They capture all the strong men to be used as slaves and kill anyone who dares challenge them. Baku, in a panic, hides in a hut, but ends up witnessing his mother's death at the hands of the executioner One-Eye. Delay, who had fallen asleep outside the tribe to deal with his guilt, is awakened by the screams of battle and decides to help, but Tik-Tik stops him, aware that they stand no chance against such enemies. The warlord, leader of the horsemen, notices Evelet's beauty and decides to take her for himself. After the horsemen leave with a group of new slaves, the tribe's survivors try to tend to what remains of their homes. Delay, in a moment of resolve, decides he will go after the horsemen, and Tik-Tik, along with Karen, agrees to go with him. Baku also wants to follow, and though they try to convince him to stay, he insists on joining the group, explaining that he has no family left. After walking a few kilometers, they find some stones that indicate someone made a fire there, and a piece of Evelet's necklace that confirms they are on the right path. As they advance, the group is hit by a snowstorm, and the old mother, following her spirits, also feels the freezing cold. The hunters manage to survive the storm, but awake to the discovery that the snow destroyed all tracks left by the horsemen. Not knowing where to go, they wander for several days and nights, beginning to question whether they are truly getting lost. Meanwhile, Evelet faces One-Eye, who sees her as prey, tries to take advantage of her, and whips her hands to break her resolve. Sometime later, the hunters finally pass through this area and find the blood-covered necklace, abandoned on the ground. Delay, worried for Evelet's life, argues with Baku, who tries to reassure him, suggesting that perhaps she simply lost it. At this crucial moment, they notice that birds are taking flight in fear, indicating that the horsemen passed through there. The forest, full of dangerous creatures, becomes a deadly hunting ground, and while a mysterious animal takes one of the horsemen, the warlord whips everyone to make them move faster. Moments later, Delay finds part of the missing horseman's armor on the ground, allowing him to follow a trail to the horseman's camp. Determined, Delay wants to attack immediately, but Tik-Tik points out that this is not a good idea, as the horsemen are alert and could catch them by surprise. The next morning, Evelet is awakened by One-Eye, who tries to take advantage of her. At this moment, Delay, upon hearing her, immediately moves to knock him out and reunite with Evelet, but they are interrupted by a sudden panic among the horses, which begin to agitate. Recognizing the opportunity, Delay grabs Evelet and, using the distraction caused by the horses' commotion, tries to free the other people captured by the horsemen. However, One-Eye sees them and starts to chase them. During the escape, they meet Tik-Tik and the others, and a tragedy unfolds, as One-Eye manages to capture Karen. The chase is suddenly interrupted by an attack of terrifying birds, and while the horsemen fight these creatures, Baku manages to climb a tree, and Tik-Tik tries to defend himself, but ends up being wounded. The group tries to hide among the trees, and Delay promises Evelet that he will return soon, before running to distract the birds attacking Baku. A new chase begins through the forest, and Delay climbs onto a rock and strikes the bird's head, getting rid of the first. Then he thrusts a bamboo stick like a spear to eliminate the other bird. But while he is focused on this, the horsemen seize the opportunity and capture Baku and Evelet. When Delay returns, he finds Tik-Tik bleeding, but still alive. He immediately improvises a support to carry Tik-Tik while continuing to follow the horsemen across the savannah, stopping only to eat and rest. On the first night, Delay lights a fire and cauterizes Tik-Tik's wound, who apologizes for not having heeded the warning. Then, when Delay goes off to hunt for food, he ends up falling into a trap and passes out. Meanwhile, back at the tribe, the old mother is awakened by visions of something terrible approaching. That night, the rain begins to fall heavily, and the trap fills with water. The rain wakes Delay, who finds himself face to face with a saber-toothed tiger trapped in the pit with him. Initially, the young man considers killing it, but repents when he realizes the animal is only fighting for its life and decides to free it, asking it not to eat him. After being freed, the tiger approaches Delay, sniffing him, but decides to leave without attacking. This, somehow, brings relief to the old mother, who can finally return to sleep without unease. Delay manages to climb out of the trap and reunites with Tik-Tik, who already feels stronger. With information about an attack that occurred beyond the hills, both set out to investigate. Upon arriving at a village devastated by the same horsemen, they find food and start eating quickly, only to be surrounded by the village's armed warriors. Apparently about to be killed, their salvation comes in the form of the tiger, which appears, causing the villagers to fall back. The tiger approaches Delay and lets out a roar of approval, warning the locals not to dare threaten him. After the tiger leaves, the villagers lay down their weapons and invite Delay and Tik-Tik to eat with them. The tribe's leader, Nakudu, manages to communicate in Delay's language, stating that he learned it from a man who looked very much like him, indicating that his father had passed through there. The idea of finding his father again sparks a glimmer of hope in Delay, but to his surprise, he discovers that his father was also captured by the horsemen, and all who were taken never returned. Nakudu, showing Delay some ancient paintings, reveals a prophecy about a man who could communicate with tigers and would free his people, clearly referring to Delay himself. Although Nakudu has sent messengers to other tribes, Delay feels he does not have the strength to be a leader. Seeking to encourage him, Tik Tik comments that his father did not abandon him. On the contrary, he left in search of a better future for the tribe. This places the responsibility on Delay to decide whether or not he will follow in his father's footsteps. The next morning, a messenger returns informing that other tribes were also attacked by the horsemen. Tik Tik asks everyone to prepare to depart, and Nakudu instructs his men to get ready to leave. As families part ways, Delay realizes that Nakudu is alone and discovers that the horsemen killed his wife and kidnapped his son, Tudu. And speaking of Tudu, at that moment, he and Baku cross paths while being dragged by the horsemen, quickly becoming friends. During a pause in the journey, One Eye tries to make Baku drink water, but the boy reacts by desperately attacking him. Immediately, One Eye lunges at Baku to kill him. Evelet, realizing what is about to happen, begs the warlord to intervene. The leader hesitates, but ends up striking One Eye, which leaves him furious. Knowing he cannot harm the leader now, he vows revenge later. Back with Delay, upon leaving the village with the others, he is shocked to see many other tribes already waiting for them, having heard the news that the great leader had arrived. Without pauses to rest, the group begins an exhausting journey on foot, and with each passing day, more tribes join them. Eventually, they reach a river and discover that the horsemen are departing in boats crowded with cages containing the slaves. Delay, upon seeing Evelet, cannot contain a shout, calling her name, and as soon as she hears him, she reveals herself so that everyone realizes that Delay is there to save them. The captives, excited by the sight of so many warriors, are quickly silenced by the horsemen. As they cannot follow the boats, the tribes begin to discuss their options. The old tale speaks of a river that moves like a snake in the sand, and the slaves are taken to the eye of the snake that rests under the sun, which does not shine under the moon. The only way without boats is through the desert, but no one has the strength to walk so far. Delay, determined, refuses to give up and instructs the tribes to cross the desert, promising that he would find the eye of the snake. For several days, the travelers realize they are getting lost, and each passing day weighs on their hearts. A few days later, on a night made for dreaming, Delay observes the sky and the North Star, which stands out brightly, thus recognizing that the eye of the snake refers to it, and that they must travel at night, using it as a guide. Meanwhile, the old mother has stopped communicating with the spirits and remains seated in silence, awaiting the exact moment to fulfill her sacred duty. As time passes, the tribes finally find the horsemen's destination, a place known as the Mountain of the Gods. The slaves had already arrived there a few days earlier and were being forced to work on the construction of a pyramid for an advanced civilization. These men, unfeeling, also enslaved mammoths, treating them with a lack of respect that provokes the indignation of Baku and Karen. When a horn is sounded, everyone must kneel to receive the leader known as the Almighty, along with his priests. Today, the Almighty, in an expansive mood, is dissatisfied with the slowness with which the slaves are working and decides to punish the disobedient, ordering the priests to sacrifice one of them as an example. One of Karen's friends ends up being thrown from the building, dying instantly. Meanwhile, Delay begins to lose hope. Even with the union of all the tribes, they do not have enough men to attack. However, Tik Tik suggests that if the slaves join them, they will have the strength needed to face the oppressors. When night falls, Delay and Nakudu sneak into the building where the slaves are held. While Nakudu reunites with his son, Delay questions Baku about Evelet, only to discover that the women are being kept in a separate building. In a moment of introspection, Delay apologizes to Karen for his capture, but the young man is a fervent believer in the prophecy, promising Delay that he will follow him to the end. A slave from another tribe, dissatisfied, criticizes Delay's presence, worried that his risk puts everyone in danger. He scoffs at the number of spears Delay has, claiming that weapons could not kill a god. Nakudu, perceiving the doubt among the slaves, tells them that Delay possesses extraordinary powers that allow him to communicate with tigers. Guided by their instincts, the slaves immediately introduce him to a blind man who is hidden underground. This man, a former servant of a god who fled, knows what the divine fears most: the mark of the hunter, representing the brightest star in the sky. If Delay is not in possession of the mark, he will not be able to defeat the Almighty. At this instant, the guards approach, forcing Delay and Nakudu to leave quickly. However, before departing, Delay asks the blind man about his bracelet, which seems familiar. To his surprise, the man reveals that it was his father who saved his life, but sadly, he is now dead. Nakudu and Delay, with a sense of urgency, run back to their army, only to discover that some guards followed them. The tribe members prepare to fight, but Tik-Tik appears first, facing the guards alone. With skill and dexterity, he knocks them all down, but one of the guards only pretends to be dead and stabs Tik-Tik when he turns. Desperate, Delay runs to Tik-Tik, crying out for him as the slaves hesitate to fight alongside him, bound by their own prophecy. Tik-Tik, with his last breath, reminds Delay that prophecies do not have a single face and hands him the white spear before passing away. Meanwhile, Evelet is taken to the chambers of the warlord, who sees her as a prize. Evelet, with skill, tries to steal a sword, but before she can defend herself, priests and guards interrupt the moment. The warlord, realizing what is happening, tries to defend himself, but ends up being exposed by One Eye. Back with Delay, he buries Tik-Tik, remembers his teachings, and with that, resolves to become a good leader. Now finally accepting the responsibility of the White Spear, he gives a great speech to the tribes, calling everyone to unite to defeat the giants, just as they do in their mammoth hunts. The next morning, they prepare in an organized manner. When they bury their spears in the sand, they enter the camp imitating slaves, and Delay tells Baku that today he will be a hunter. He then begins to spread the message that a fight is approaching. While Evelet is brought before the Almighty along with the warlord, he tries to justify himself before the divine presence. The priest warns the Almighty that a great army of warriors with spears is approaching. Back with the slaves, Delay and Karen find the lead mammoth and prepare. They send Baku and Tudu to play their parts, freeing the mammoths from their bonds. Once they finish, Delay gives the signal, and while all the slaves begin to attack their oppressors, he tries to scare the lead mammoth, in vain. The guards appear, and Karen, in an act of bravery, decides to face them to buy time for Delay, sacrificing himself for his people. Furious over the death of a friend, Delay shouts loudly to scare the mammoth. The mammoths begin to run, crushing all the guards in their path. The presence of the mammoths instills courage in the slaves, who finally rise up and revolt against their oppressors. When the Almighty hears the screams of battle, he orders the priests to sacrifice Evelet in front of everyone, with the intention of breaking the spirit of those who fight. Seeing Evelet in that situation, Delay orders a halt, and all prostrate themselves to the sound of the horn. The Almighty appears, threatening that if Delay does not back down, Evelet will be sacrificed. Delay accepts the conditions imposed, but only if he is allowed to take his people with him. The Almighty, reluctantly, agrees that Delay may take only the members of his tribe, and emphasizes that the others cannot go, as they belong to a god. Refusing to abide by these baseless terms, Delay hurls his white spear, striking the Almighty and revealing to all that he was not a god, but a human like any of them. Inspired by the revealed truth, the slaves join the fight with renewed fury. Baku, seeking revenge, spots One Eye and tries to kill him as a way to purge the pain of his mother's death, but misses the shot, leading One Eye to capture Tudu. Nakudu, seeing his son in danger, corrects this mistake in time, killing One Eye to save his son's life. While the slaves storm the main structure to overthrow the priests and burn the oppressors' boats to ashes, the warlord frees Evelet, taking her away on his horse. Delay, wasting no time, begins a sprint toward them, and when Evelet notices him, she seizes an arrow to attack the warlord, causing them both to fall from their horses. Delay and Evelet run toward each other, but before they can finally reunite, the warlord fires his arrow, striking Evelet. Delay feels his soul almost leave his body upon seeing this, and the old mother immediately, connected to the events, begins to bleed. A Delay, overcome by grief and fury, rushes toward the warlord, killing him with the white spear. The people around them, seized by joy, begin to celebrate the victory, but Delay's heart only grows heavy as he looks at Evelette, who is dying in his arms. Devastated and anguished by the loss, Delay turns to the mammoths, pleading for a merciful death. However, at that exact moment, the old mother releases her last breath. As she dies, Evelette miraculously returns to life. Delay runs to the woman he loves, and the tribe, after all their suffering, can finally celebrate, without fears that might torment them again. Sometime later, the tribes return to their villages. Nakudu gifts Delay with seeds collected by his father, which should help feed his people. Both tribes bid farewell, as this is the last time they meet. A few days later, Delay and the rescued return to their tribe and plant the seeds, which quickly begin to grow. With Delay as the new leader and enough food to sustain the village, the old mother's prophecy has finally come true.